Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to episode 366 of the Tolkien Road, or episode 2 in the Do Not Be Hasty Reckoning. Greta, bring us up to speed.
About what?
Whatever you got to bring us up to speed about.
Yeah. Okay. So we're a whole episode in of our reboot, and it kind of feels like that I've never not been here. So that's kind of great.
Vroom,
Let's
vroom.
see. Anything else?
That works. I feel like I'm up to speed now.
It's so nebulous. I'm like, up to speed on what? And like, how personal do you want me to get here? I mean,
that's what I do. I like to put you on the spot at the very beginning of the episode.
Yeah. Well, maybe you should bring me up to speed, John.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think you should.
I refuse.
All right, fine.
Going slow. We're here to not be hasty.
Wait, then why did I have to do this? Be those one on speed?
The one on speed. Goodness.
Oh, that came out wrong.
Not happening here.
The one on hyper speed.
Okay.
Yes.
It's got awkward real quick. All right.
Oh dear. Moving on.
Before we begin, we'd like to give a double of Air 5 to our amazing fellowship. Stick 'em up, fellowship. 3, 2, 1. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, John R., Melkor27, and KG. Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in March of 2024. Peter B., Paul D., Stephen S., Jay-Z, Bethany E., Daniel D., and Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the years.
Yes, thank you.
All right. In this episode, we resume our exploration of Lord of the Rings, Book 1, Chapter 1, A Long Expected Party, by considering the section from 12 more years past to this very month as is. The bulk of this section concerns Hamfast Gamgee, a.k.a. the Gaffer, and his conversation with other Shire-folk, including Daddy Twofoot, Sandyman the Miller, and Old Noakes. Through their humorous back and forth, we'll come to understand how Bilbo and Frodo are generally viewed around the Shire, and discover something of where the Gaffer's son, Samwise, gets his personality. All right, well, let's jump right in here. 12 more years passed. 12 more years passed from what? We started at Bilbo's 111th birthday, then we went back to 99. It's amazing how it got confusing real quick.
Real quick. Yeah, right from the get-go.
Here we are at this man's 111st birthday, but by the way, when he was 99, right? You know, and there's something I will just say right there. There's something about that method of storytelling that I inherently love, and is kind of whimsical and fairy tale-ish and like innocent. You know, it's not like it just has this like underlying sense of humor to it. I feel like some of my favorite stories kind of begin in that sort of like, here we go, but wait a minute, let's go back a little bit real quick, right? You know, I feel like there's some like films that I really love that begin in that sort of fashion, you know?
There's also a sense in which they're like, the stories themselves seem like they're outside of time, and that time is just more of a formality than anything, and that's really doesn't even figure in that much to the story, you know, that it's not really that important to the plot. It's just like, you know, yeah, this happened and this happened. Oh, and then a few years ago, this happened.
It actually reminds me a lot of like The Princess Bride with you know, the whole like grandfather telling his grandson the story, and then like the grandson interrupts him all the time, and it's like, wait a minute, what happened? How did this happen? You know, how do we get there?
Yeah, and it's like that's not really that important. You know, I mean, there needs to be some structure, but I think a lot of the times we put too much stock in the notion of time and place and things like that, instead of just giving ourselves over to the events.
Amen. All right, well, it's weird because we start off at 111 and immediately jump back to a quick recap of the last 60 years and how Frodo came to live with Bilbo. The average hobbit lifespan, Bilbo seems to kind of be pushing the edge of it, right? Yeah. The Old Took, it says, was 130 years. One would guess that was maybe the longest that anyone knew of at that point, that a hobbit had lived. And it must be longer than men, the average hobbit lifespan, because the coming of age was at 33, right? And you think of like coming of age for people is like 18 to 21, like maybe 16 to 21 is kind of like the normal span of what people might think there, right? So obviously hobbits maybe their lifespan is like, maybe 100 would be normal for your average hobbit, maybe. Mm-hmm. So Bilbo being 111 is like, and then he still like looks in pretty good health. Yep. That's probably, people are like, what is going on with this guy?
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about this in the last episode, Greta. Is there significance in their ages? So Bilbo is 111 years old, or going to be 111 years old, and Frodo is 33. It seems like there's some kind of numerology going on there, right? Like they're, like those numbers obviously seem to have some kind of significance. You have one that's 3 ones, and the other is 2 3s, right? And they both involve 3. Most of us probably can't help but be like, those don't seem just like random numbers. I don't know. My thought was, you said something in the last episode about Jesus and the age in which kind of like he's traditionally thought to have been crucified, 33. Maybe there's something to that. I kind of thought maybe it's like a Trinitarian wink, because Tolkien refers in one of his letters, the Waldman letter, to like a legendary, creating a legendarium in Middle Earth that was like that would not be sort of offensive, if you will, to the Trinitarian mind, right? And so now there's no like real indication to say that like Tolkien deliberately chose those numbers for that reason. In fact, in the history of Middle Earth, when you go back and look at Tolkien's very first version of this, this early section of A Long Expected Party, Bilbo is actually 70, right? Bilbo is actually 70 when for this birthday in the original version. It didn't become 111 until several drafts in. There was actually some other interesting changes that we'll probably talk about on our MATHOMS episode with regard to the original, like the earlier versions of this chapter, and how Tolkien like kind of rewrote it again and again and again until it became something that started to resemble what we have here. But I will say that basic framework of Bilbo like disappearing at his birthday party was there from the very beginning. Okay. So, all right. So rumor of the coming events began to travel all over the Shire, and we meet this individual, Ham Gamgee, and Ham Gamgee is the Gaffer. I can't tell you for how long I wondered who Sam was referring to when he referred to the Gaffer, especially when I first saw the movies and first read the books, because this figure doesn't really come back up, much after this chapter, and until like, unless Sam is referring to the Gaffer, and he says, "My old Gaffer," right? And you're like, who is that? You kind of think it's maybe his father or his grandfather or something like that, right? But there's no like, certainly Gaffer is not a word that you or I use or, grew up having heard.
Right.
So, it's interesting word here, of course. So we're going to take a look at the etymology of Gaffer here. So Gaffer is, let's see here. We've got Gaffer. Oh, yeah, I lost my notes here. Let's see. Gaffer, it's not the person who does it on a film set now. All right, so
there's Tolkien being ahead of his time again.
Yeah, I think I'm let's see. That's not someone who messes up. That would be making a gaffe. Yeah, for some reason it was here, and now I can't find it. Well, anyway, I think it might be because I have the. Yeah, okay, there we go. There it is. It's because I had the because it's like now everything's super white, and so we're all getting like washed out by the light coming from the screens. I had it on dark mode, and so I couldn't see the translations. Okay. All right. So old man, a foreman, or a sailor. Oh. So old man is probably
also a baby.
Yeah. Well. Anyway.
Now I'm confused.
Likely a contraction of godfather, but with the vowels influenced by grandfather. So old man, the leader of a group or team, such as a boss, foreman, coach, or publican. So I think it's kind of used in the first two senses here, right? An old man, but also like the boss, because Sam probably views him as his old man and also as his boss, right? His foreman.
So they are related. They have the same last name.
Yes, yeah, they are. Yeah, they are father and son.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what the term gaffer means. It really means old man, but it also has sort of a professional sense to it in the sense of like working relationship. It's kind of the foreman, right? The boss, boss on site, right?
Okay.
The name Gamgee, there's a lot to be said here. There's a whole lot about it in the Reader's Companion. I'm actually going to save that for the MATHOMS episode, and we'll discuss that more at a later time.
What is MATHOMS?
So MATHOMS. So I told you about the MATHOMS episode. On
yeah,
the last
you mentioned
one, right?
it, but I didn't think to ask what it meant.
So MATHOMS are it's another word that occurs in Lord of the Rings, and it's essentially like all of these things that like you hang on to but don't know what to do with, right? So
like loose ends, kind of.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah,
Scraps.
that's right.
Got
yeah,
it.
so we're gonna have a MATHOMS episode there towards.
It's like you use scraps to make a stock, so that's gonna be like our stock making episode.
Right on.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hamfast. So his actual first name is not Ham, it's Hamfast. The name Hamfast is not a name that was given because he ate ham fast, but it meant to stay at home. Yeah, so and there's some other interesting things about that name that we'll get to in the MATHOMS episode as well.
Okay.
So Hamfast Gamgee, the Gaffer, that's who is kind of the star of this little section of the Fellowship of the Ring, of this first chapter of Lord of the Rings. He attended the garden at Bag End for 40 years, right? So he was Bilbo's gardener. And so we know how Sam became the gardener eventually, right? Yep. The Gaffer was recognized as the leading authority on roots, especially potatoes, taters, right? Bilbo had apparently treated him very well. Issues of class are inherent here, and how Bilbo, though very wealthy and perhaps even noble, treats the lower class as well, or perhaps does not even pay much mind to class distinctions.
Well, we mentioned that in the last episode too, where he was known to be like well thought of, with among the poor, and less well-to-do members of the Shire. Yeah, for sure. And here's what the Reader's Companion has to say about this. Tolkien uses the word master here, as often in The Lord of the Rings, as an expression of respect in the archaic sense of a title denoting high rank, learning, etc. Bilbo respects Gaffer Gamgee as a master gardener, distinct from Mr., as Mr. Bilbo Baggins or Mr. Frodo, which is a title of respect in a broader sense, and occasionally master is a title applied to males not yet come of age. Sam Gamgee himself becomes Master Samwise at last in Book 6, Chapter 4, so called by Gandalf after the successful events on Mount Doom. So Master here he refers to him as Master Gamgee, right? Master Hamfast. Because he is a master gardener, right? He's a master of this particular trade. So it's a sign of respect to call him that, right? And not just like you're the gardener, but like, you're the master, right? I respect you for your deep knowledge on these matters, right? Bilbo might be rich, but he didn't know a thing about gardening, so it makes sense that he would respect him for that.
Yeah, or at least he respects that this guy knows a lot more than I do, right?
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's cool, and just shows, what like a positive aspect of Bilbo's character, right?
For sure.
Another interesting note here. Well, this is another topic we'll probably get into more in the MATHOMS episode, but there are for all of the talk that I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings because of the verisimilitude, the sense that it all kind of like it's all kind of real within this literary world. The detail is so rich. There are a lot of things that if we kind of take the idea that this is an ancient, like happened in the ancient history of this world, that this all kind of happened in that time, like just many thousands of years ago or something like that. The Shire is the most problematic aspect of that, because the Shire is it's just filled with these like kind of anachronisms. And one of which, interestingly, is potatoes. Potatoes did not come to to Britain and to the British Isles until after the discovery of the New World, right? Because they came from the New World. So, and it's the same thing with tobacco, right? So Tolkien uses the term pipeweed, but I guess he liked the word potatoes, so he still uses the word potatoes here.
Even though they're not really, so he's not talking about potatoes as we know potatoes.
Well, I think he is. I think it's like, or I don't know. I think this is just the hobbits themselves are kind of just meant to be this oddity anyway,
Gotcha.
right? So he just went with it. But I found that to be an interesting note. I had no idea that potatoes did not have like an ancient history in Europe. So
that's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Does it mean that the British are like known for French fries?
Mm-hmm.
Or what is it? What do they call them? Frites? I don't know. Anyway.
The British or chips?
Well, I was thinking about chips. Yeah, I was thinking about fish and chips.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a British specialty. So it seems like they would know, or just Ireland itself, like they're known for potatoes too. So.
Yes.
Anyway, I digress.
Oh, it's good. We're all about digressions here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention to the conversation at the Ivy Bush, this inn near Bywater. By the way, quick note: we'll just pop over to our map of the Shire here. We have, if you are watching on YouTube, you can see me here. We have Hobbiton and the hill right there. That's where Bag End is in this area. Bywater is just a little bit, maybe a mile or two down the road from there. So kind of the town right next to the east, to the southeast from Hobbiton. So that's where this conversation that we're about to read about is taking place.
Okay.
So the Gaffer was a lad. He was just a boy when Bilbo returned from Erebor, right? So in 2951. So it's interesting to me because I feel like my impression of the Gaffer is that he's actually older than Bilbo, but he's not. He's actually younger than Bilbo by a good amount of time, actually. So we have the Gaffer here. We have Old Noakes of Bywater. Come back to him in a second. We have Daddy Twofoot, which I just love that name, Daddy Twofoot. I'm like, who doesn't have two, like, as opposed to 1 foot or 3 feet? Like, what's the
maybe he was a really good dancer.
Or maybe it's
he's a really bad dancer.
Maybe it refers to his height. Maybe he's hobbits would be like 3 feet or something like that.
He's
so maybe
smaller side.
he was on the smaller side. I don't know. That's what the other thing I was thinking is maybe he's a really good dancer.
Yeah.
Old Daddy Twofoot. And then Sandyman the Miller. I'm gonna like laugh whenever I say Daddy Twofoot. Sandyman the Miller. We'll talk about why the Gaffer seems to dislike him so much. There's an interesting little thought there. Real quick on Old Noakes of Bywater. So about a year ago, we discussed Smith of Wootton Major on this podcast, and Noakes was a character in that story. Noakes was actually a very important character in that story. Now, it's not this same Noakes, but it's interesting that he uses this same name. And Noakes in that story is a character that is dismissive of the perilous realm, right? So Noakes is kind of this. He's not evil per se, but he's sort of a naysayer, if you will, and just like kind of an unlikable sort of figure, and somewhat hobbitish, I would say. But this Noakes, so the Noakes here would have predated the Noakes in Smith of Wootton Major, because Smith of Wootton Major wasn't written until after The Lord of the Rings was published. But anyway, that name does reoccur in the story Smith of Wootton Major.
Interesting.
So let's talk about Sandyman the Miller real quick. Sandyman is the father of Ted Sandyman, who will come up later on. But there's an interesting note about like the Gaffer and not liking the Sandyman the Miller. Apparently he doesn't like him. You can kind of tell he doesn't. In the Reader's Companion, this is what it says. The Hobbiton watermill is shown in Tolkien's pictures of Hobbiton for The Hobbit. The Gaffer does not much like the miller. In the medieval village, the miller was the most prosperous and the least popular inhabitant, as the villagers had to bring their grain to him for milling, and he did the measuring. Naturally, he was suspected of cheating, and in literature of the Middle Ages, such as Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, he is typically characterized as dishonest. In The Lord of the Rings, the Miller seems a genuinely unsavory character, and his son, Ted Sandyman, who takes up with the ruffians, is even worse. So, yeah, there's this idea that, like, in ancient times, the Miller, he was the most prosperous and the least popular inhabitant, right? Everybody had to bring their grain to him. Like, he was the one that had to process everything, and did the measuring, right? So when you do the measuring, you have the opportunity to maybe cheat the system a little bit, or just be unpopular because people are like, hey, like, I thought, can't you help me out here, So that's an interesting thing that most of us probably wouldn't have made sense, kind of put that together, right?
Right.
But maybe the gaffer dislikes him for more reasons than just this guy's kind of a jerk, or maybe he's a jerk because he is the Miller. I don't know. But apologies to all those people out there with the last name Miller. And I guess apologies to those with the last name Sandyman and Sackville too. So anyway, I didn't name these people. It wasn't me. It was Tolkien. So blame it on him. All right. Any thoughts on that, Greta?
No. I mean, he does make it very, very clear that he doesn't like the Miller. So I was curious about that. So I appreciate you explaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then there's this stranger, this fifth person that speaks about that comes from Michelle Delving, and we never get the name of this individual. So
Is it Michelle or Michael?
You had to ask, didn't you? I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know.
I read it as Michael, but
let's see.
But I guess
here.
It does look
probably going
like
to come back to that.
Michelle.
Yeah, I go back and forth. I think I've called it Michelle Delving.
That makes sense.
Michelle Delving. Michael Delving. Let's see. I don't know that we have pronunciation here.
Okay. No, that's totally fine.
Yeah. It's derived from Old English. Micelle is normally pronounced as modern CH. Here most probably. So Mitchell Delving. Mitchell Delving.
Mitchell. Okay.
I think that's right. Mitchell Delving.
Sounds good.
Anyway, it always throws me off whenever I see that Michel.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that more on the MATHOMS probably.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. So Frodo's family history. Kind of a tragic family history here for Frodo. Poor old Frodo.
Yeah.
His parents were drowned. Another funny word but in a tragic context here. We don't normally say drowned, of course, but this is another word that it's a humorous moment when you're listening to the audiobook, because they say, the gaffer's all like, his parents drowned, and everybody's like, drowned, right? Just this repetition of this word that sounds like one we don't use, but it's again, it kind of, I think these words, why I like these words like tweens, 11 first, is because there is drowned. There's sort of it emphasizes that sense of the like innocence and childlikeness of the hobbits,
Yeah, I was gonna say they sound very childish in a way.
Yeah,
those words.
Yeah,
like a kid that's just learning to speak. Like that's how they would say those words. Yeah.
We find out that Frodo's mother, it says, was a queer Brandybuck, but also a Took, right? So Miss Primula Brandybuck. Primula is kind of a cool name. What do you think?
Primula.
Do you not like it? You're making a name like you don't like it.
Yeah, I'm making a name like I don't like it.
Or a face like you don't like it.
No, not my favorite.
Yeah.
It doesn't. No. It didn't really do anything for me.
Yeah. Well, I like it.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why I don't like it. Like it kind of like rhymes with like calendula and like I don't know. It sounds kind of medicinal to me. Primula. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, moving on.
Well, I hope you never meet anybody named Primula.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, if I do, I'll just call her Prim, because Prim is actually I like that name. Like Primrose or Prim, like Prim and proper. That's kind of nice.
All right.
Yeah.
His father Drogo was a local boy, but spent a lot of time at Buckland, which was a queer place, right? Because of where it's located, right? Because of where it's located. So let's go back to our map of the Shire again. So we have Hobbiton here circled in red. We have Bywater circled in red. And then all the way over here, right there, we have Buckland. I'm going to choose a different color than this. Let's go with like blue or something. Yeah, there we go. because there's a lot of red already in this map. There you go. Buckland right there. Okay, Buckland right along the eastern bank of the Brandywine River, on the eastern border of the Shire. It juts up against the Old Forest, which is a kind of scary place for the hobbits, especially the hobbits of Hobbiton. So you figure that if you're in good Hobbiton logic, if you live on the edge of the Old Forest, you got to be a little off, right? Plus, you like going on the water, right? Like, who in their right mind wants to go in a boat on the water? Okay, that's crazy. That's crazy. So the people of Hobbiton view these people that live in far-off Buckland with a lot of suspicion.
Right.
Drogo, this Drogo Baggins, this good local boy, goes off and marries this Brandybuck from Buckland, from this from this queer place and this queer group of people. He just must have been crazy, and so their son Frodo. Well, that just kind of tells you all you need to know about Frodo, right? Frodo grew up in Brandy Hall in Buckland before he came to live with Bilbo. It's a funny little, like kind of path, even though again it's tragic, but it's funny. It's kind of funny how the story all unfolded. Let's see here. Did I highlight it? I guess I didn't. But we have, and no wonder they're queer, put in Daddy Twofoot, the Gaffer's next door neighbor. If they live on the wrong side of the Brandywine River and right again the Old Forest, that's a dark bad place if half the tales be true. You're right, Dad, said the Gaffer. Not that the Brandybucks of Buckland live in the Old Forest, but they're a queer breed, seemingly. They fool about with boats on that big river, and that isn't natural. Again, that idea of something not being natural, right? Small wonder that trouble came of it, I say. But be that as it may, Mr. Frodo is as nice a young hobbit as you could wish to meet. Very much like Mr. Bilbo, and in more than looks. After all, his father was a Baggins. A decent, respectable hobbit was Mr. Drogo Baggins. There was never much to tell of him till he was drowned. Drowned, said several voices. They had heard this and other dark rumors before, of course, but hobbits have a passion for family history, and they were ready to hear it again. Well, so they say, said the Gaffer. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married poor Miss Primula Brandybuck. She was our Mr. Bilbo's first cousin on the mother's side, her mother being the youngest of the Old Noakes' daughters, and Mr. Drogo was his second cousin. So Mr. Frodo is his first and second cousin, once removed either way, as the saying is, if you follow me. And Mr. Drogo was staying at Brandy Hall with his father-in-law, old Master Gorbodoc, as he often did after his marriage, him being partial to his victuals and old Gorbodoc keeping a mighty generous table. And he went out boating on the Brandywine River, and he and his wife were drowned, and poor Mr. Frodo, only a child and all. I've heard they went on the water after dinner in the moonlight, said Old Noakes, and it was Drogo's weight as sunk the boat. And I heard she pushed him in, and he pulled her in after him, said Sandyman, the Hobbiton Miller. So you have this like escalating like rumors of what happened, right? First it was Drogo's weight sunk the boat, and then it was she fell in and pulled him in after her, right?
No, he fell in and he pushed her. She pushed
him in, and he pulled her in after him.
She pushed him.
Yeah. So like double murder, right? Right, of double spouse murder, crazy, right? So anyway, Frodo has tragically lost his parents, and that's how he eventually comes to live with Bilbo at Bag End. And we then hear that was a nasty knock for those Sackville-Bagginses. And we talked a little bit about the Sackville-Bagginses on the last episode. The combining of last names is a breaking with the standard convention, so it seems, in the Shire. I was interested in this, so I went back and just kind of like wanted to understand better, like who were these people. So there's something of the Sackville name, a wealthier family, maybe happened so the Sackville name could pass to the son of Lobelia Sackville-Baggins, who would have been the only Sackville heir, right? So, I'm sorry, it's not Lobelia, but Carmelia. So basically, here's the story. The Sackville-Bagginses. Carmelia was the daughter of of the head of the Sackville family, she married Longo Baggins, the son of Mungo Baggins. Sometime prior to the birth of her first son, Otho, Carmelia's father died, and he would have been like the head of the Sackville family, right? Because there was no male heir with the name Sackville, they added the name Sackville to their last name so that Otho, could be the inheritor of this whatever, right? This family estate. So they were a somewhat rich family, or maybe not even rich, because they always seem to think Bilbo is richer than them and want his money. Maybe there was just some kind of sense of like respectedness, and so the name, then they felt the name was respected or something like that, and so they wanted to pass it along. So that's the story on this name Sackville-Baggins. It is Otho Sackville-Baggins and Lobelia Bracegirdle marries into this family, and that is the Lobelia Sackville-Baggins that Bilbo kind of dreads and maybe faces off with some. And then Lotho will come into the story. The son of Otho and Lobelia will come into the story much later on. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We have a little bit about Sam through the Gaffer's eyes. We haven't actually met Sam in person yet, but we have a little bit about him through his father's eyes. Bilbo learned him his letters.
Does that mean he taught him to read or write?
That means, I think, both, right?
Okay.
A little of both.
Okay.
So Bilbo learned him his letters. It says, Mr. Bilbo had learned him his letters, meaning no harm, mark you, and I hope no harm will come of it. Right? Don't want learning them letters. That can be bad for you, right? You just love it, right? Like it's so great. Like just the old perspective of this like old master gardener, right? Who's never learned to read or write, right? Learning your letters? What would you go and do a thing like that for? Right? Like
you don't need to know how to read or write to garden, right?
Nothing but trouble can come of that, I'm telling you, right?
Yes.
Elves and dragons, I says to him, cabbages and potatoes are better for me and you. Don't go getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you, I says to him. And I might say it to others, he added with a look at the stranger and the miller. So Sam loves these old stories that Bilbo tells, and Sam is still a pretty young man, and a pretty young hobbit. And he's been very influenced by these things, even though he's thinking to himself, like, my lot in life is to be a gardener, like my father was, right? And apparently he's a pretty good one. Bilbo, we learn, was often away from home. And this is one of those things that I've wondered for a long time now, right? So 60-year period between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, okay? The 111st birthday.
Yep.
Just think about all the different adventures that were more like Hobbit level adventures that could have been that Tolkien could have told, right? It's kind of a bummer that we'll never have those tales, from Tolkien. Like, you feel like there could just be like a compilation of short stories about Bilbo's other advers,
that fills in those 60 years.
Yeah, that fills in those 60 years. I think that would be a great, at some point somebody could develop that into like a anime, like kind of a more not like children's oriented, but something that's like kind of the Hobbit level stories, like visual stories. I think that would be something that could be cool to develop, like the further adventures of Bilbo Baggins or something like that, right? Just kind of a little, like, not as heavy stories as Lord of the Rings, more of just that Hobbit level sort of storytelling, like great adventures.
Yeah.
I don't know. You think there's anything to that?
Yeah, I think so. It kind of makes me wonder why that big gap. Like, why, why would he leave that much time in between and not explain? I wonder if he had planned to and just never got to it. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know that there ever was a plan to do that. So
well, then why leave like a 60-year gap? I wonder.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the original version was so
he was
only 70. It was only like 20 years.
Right. So it would have been less. So I wonder why he increased it.
Well, I guess we'll talk about that more as we get into get further into the story.
All right.
But I don't know that there's like a hard and fast reason for it, but maybe because there was more backstory that he needed to unfold in that period of time. before Bilbo, like for more time for events to develop between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Gotcha.
In other words. All right. So for all this talk, the Gaffer is, he kind of like, he agrees that Bilbo is an odd fellow, and Frodo, being a Baggins and being from Buckland, also kind of an odd fellow, right? But he seems to think they're good people, right? He really thinks they're good people.
Yes. Yeah.
He says, and you can say what you like about what you know more of than you do of boating, Mr. Sandyman, retorted the Gaffer. About what you know no more of than you do of boating, Mr. Sandyman, retorted the Gaffer, disliking the Miller even more than usual. If that's being queer, then we could do with a bit more queerness in these parts. There's some not far away that wouldn't offer a pint of beer to a friend if they lived in a hole with golden walls. But they do things proper at Bag End. Our Sam says that everyone's going to be invited to the party, and there's going to be presents, mark you, presents for all, this very month as is. So, again, Bilbo, through the eyes of those who seem to know him best, is viewed as a generous person, a good person, even if he is just pretty strange overall for a hobbit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why the distaste for water and boating among the hobbits. That it was funny when they mentioned it initially about calling it unnatural. I was my brain immediately went to the Grey Havens and the hobbits getting on the boat, to go there. So, I don't know. It just kind of made me wonder why they don't like water. Why do they feel like it's so unnatural? I mean, it's obviously not unnatural. It's natural. It's a natural substance. But they seem to have a real dislike for it, like cats.
Yeah, I think with birthdays and with this, the aversion to water, there is a. I think both of these things allude to the Sméagol and Daigle event.
Interesting.
And it's like they don't know that, but like there's a, there's sort of like because those things happened many generations ago from a Hobbit perspective, but. And really in a faraway place too, but there's maybe this like sort of ancient sense that's been passed down that like, well, birthdays aren't about receiving presents. Birthdays are about giving away presents. And, don't go out on the water because only trouble will come of that. Right. And these sorts of things just kind of got passed down over time.
That makes sense.
That's a theory I've had since we did this read through, the first time.
That's a good point.
I kind of like it. I don't know that there's any like supporting evidence from Tolkien to suggest that, like where he ever commented on that, but that's my thought. Those are my personal thoughts.
So because the ring was found in water.
Yeah, well remember. So Daigle.
Sméagol was drowned.
No, Daigle falls into the water.
Right.
And finds the ring in the water, and he comes out of the water, and then Sméagol takes strangles him and takes it from him, right? So it's kind of like...
I thought he held him underwater. I guess I was wrong about that.
I don't think I don't think I'm conflating what happens in the film with the book. I think they had it right, but we'll get to it when we see that later. But the point is that like he fell in the water and found this thing that caused all this trouble.
Right? Okay, so that's why water brings nothing good, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why you give gifts on your birthday instead of receiving them because
Sméagol took it because he wanted it because it was his birthday.
Right. So wanting gifts on your birthday only brings trouble too.
But it could also just be that the hobbits aren't good swimmers because they have such big feet that drag them down in the water.
I would think that would make them good swimmers. They're like fins. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, because they're also fat.
Yeah,
that
maybe.
Would probably make them bad swimmers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Conjecture. All it is. All we can do is conjecture on these things, but it's fun to conjecture.
It is absolutely fun.
What else? What else did I miss in this section?
No, I think that was really good. I'll be honest. This part wasn't as interesting to me as the first part.
Yeah. Well, there's gonna be some sections that are a little less interesting.
But I think you did a really good job with it.
Great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, it is. I think good. Like we probably would have completely skipped over this on a like one chapter per episode sort of discussion, right?
Yeah.
This whole thing happens with the Gaffer, and then blah blah blah. Move on, right? Let's get to the birthday, right? But it's like good to spend some time like with the Gaffer and these other figures, like you know, like a name like you gotta like acknowledge a guy with the name Daddy Twofoot. You just have to. Right?
Yeah. So, I totally agree, and I think it's good too to, you know, I think just from the standpoint of character development, I think it's really helpful to kind of deep dive into this stuff.
And hopefully taking this time when we're further in, we'll like make deeper connections with all the details further into the story as well. You know?
Yep, absolutely. For sure.
All right. Well, it may seem like an easy lesson, but it bears repeating. Though a person may seem peculiar or strange on the surface, the reality of their character is, of course, another matter, revealed in the way they live their life. And we see something of the future brilliance of Sam Gamgee and the attitude of his father, the Gaffer, towards the strange Bagginses, Bilbo and Frodo. In the next episode, preparation for Bilbo's birthday are afoot, and that mysterious old conjurer Gandalf returns to the Shire with fireworks in tow.
Whoop whoop.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider supporting us in one or all of the following ways. You want to do this?
Oh, yeah, sure. So you can join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and lands you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. Second, if you're watching, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. Finally, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on. As always, keep the correspondence coming. We'll do our best to respond to you somehow and at some point. With Don't Be Hasty, we'll let the mail pile up and then do a big mailbag episode at the end of each chapter. We can't promise you that it will be read on air, but we'll do our best, and some correspondence most certainly will. Go for it.
All right, don't forget to stop by TrueMythsPress.com for great merch like super styling and comfy Tolkien Road t-shirts, 2 Trees camper mugs, and signed copies of my books. Once again, that's TrueMythsPress.com. Thanks for supporting our work with your purchase. To close, as always, we'd like to thank our amazing fellowship. Our love for you goes up to 11. Special thanks to the following: John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien. Let's do this back and forth.
Melkor27.
KG.
Emilio P.
Jonathan D.
Richard K.
Paul D.
Julia.
Wordy.
Chris B.
2or91.
Carolyn S.
Emil K.
Brian O. II.
Jonathan R.
Ms. Anonymous.
Andrew T.
Red Hawk.
Shannon S.
Brian O. the First.
Zeke F.
James L.
Chris L.
Asia V.
Ish of the Hammer.
Teresa C.
David of Pints with Jack.
And Eric B.
Brian O. the First. That's how you did it. That made me laugh. All right. That's it for this episode, you guys. Thanks for listening and or watching. We will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.